Lately, I've had a few interactions online where I simply posted something and people started making some really negative, out of turn comments. Well, this episode addresses that. Are people getting shittier? Watch and or listen while we tackle tough and sometimes taboo topics filmed live over drinks. This platform allows us to articulate our thoughts and challenge our beliefs. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy. All right, we are live. Welcome to SipTalk, episode 268. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, philosopher, philanderer, philanthropist, philatelist, phlebotomist, a man of many PHs. I think I'm lost on one. What am I missing?
Philatelist, phlebotomist, philosopher, philanderer?
Philanderer. James, how's it hanging down there in sunny South Carolina?
It's weird to be back, man.
Yeah, I can only imagine you're going for 2 weeks. Probably my guess would be the biggest difference would be it would be the time zone change, but not because of jet lag specifically, but because of the hours that you were keeping over there, almost being half nocturnal.
Sort of. I don't like waking up early in the morning. And this entire week I've been waking up early in the morning because my entire body clock is off by about 4 hours.
Yeah. One second, because I've been, I had this nice frosted glass. I've really been dying to, but now it's just kind of like damp looking. But I promise you, it's ice cold. What are you drinking down there?
I got myself a PBR. I want to talk briefly about the trip because one of the things. So I had many conversations with people that were over there, and apparently Americans visiting Tenerife is not all that common.
But it's a hike, and it's a lesser known.
Americans visiting Spain is quite common. Americans visiting Tenerife isn't.
So, and why did they tell you why, or did you deduce why?
I just think that it's much more a destination for like Northern Europe.
Yeah,
and there's the flights. There are much less air traffic from the States to Tenerife. They have inbound flights there maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and outbound flights maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you've got flights that go to like Madrid and Barcelona multiple times per day, it's just it's not as well known to the Americans as it is especially the British, because like a little bit of the history is like in the 70s and 80s, British Airlines basically bought out all of the flights available from the South Airport. And so that's why there's so many Brits there, is British Airlines basically subsidized air travel to the island. But
well, I'll admit I knew very little about it. It sounded vaguely familiar. When you mentioned I had to do some research, and obviously over the last couple of months you've filled me in as well. So I've learned a lot, but formerly I knew very little.
But a lot of the conversations I had with Europeans were like, they would ask me why I was there, and I would usually say they're like, "Are you here for vacation?" And my answer would be like, "Kind of, but I'm also thinking about moving here, so I'm trying to scope out whether or not I like the island." And I was like, I'm thinking about moving here because I want to escape the political situation of my own country. And then they would basically just it was not always the exact same response, but it was oftentimes a version of the following: "What the fuck is going on over there?"
Yeah, but I think I would be probably people are less surprised this time around. They're less kind of jaw to the floor this time around. That like, oh, America is capable of doing this, because I think the first time around they knew things were a little crazy over here, but 2016 they're like, oh shit, like that actually happened. Oh,
but I think they're less surprised in some respects and more surprised in others, because I think they're surprised
that we didn't learn our lesson.
No, they fully expected that we wouldn't. That was probably the least surprising aspect for them. I think the surprise on their part is how shitty we've been, how quickly. Like they knew that we were going to do dumb shit as soon as Trump was in power, but I don't think they estimated how dumb and how fast it would happen. So,
Well, look,
so yeah.
let me on that note, because I don't want to go too full blown politics here, but I do want to. You're touching sort of adjacently on our topic today, because it's really not so much about that. But the topic today, just to get it out there in the first 5 minutes, I got 9 seconds left. Is, are people getting shittier? And and we're talking about like interactions between people, less so kind of grander actions of a country as a whole. Is there more you wanted to squeeze in on the because I'm curious a little more
Well,
obviously about the trip, but
recently, for the past 2 months, I've liked to start off the podcast with a 3 or 4 minute diatribe on whatever dumb things have happened over the past week politically. And so I would like to alert people to the happenings from last weekend that are still playing out today, where our government has, the Department of Justice has completely ignored federal court's orders in regards to us deporting purported gang members from Venezuela to a Central American prison in El Salvador. And like,
I thought they
first of
did
all,
stop, but they
the judge said like, hey, you guys need to stop these flights, and if they're in the air, you need to turn them around. And the government said, we're just not going to do that. And then the government's lawyers were called in to account for that, and they're just like, yeah, we're not going to tell you anything. And so it's quickly becoming a constitutional crisis where you have the judicial branch just completely being flouted by the executive branch.
yeah.
And then there's also the humanitarian aspect of it, where as reporting is coming out as to the types of people that were actually on these flights, were like, maybe there were some actual gang members on there, but there were a number of people that are almost certainly not. Like
Well, I
somebody who had
imagine.
a tattoo of the logo for Real Madrid, which is a Spanish soccer team that's very popular worldwide, and allegedly they have a picture of him giving gang symbols, but it's actually a picture of him giving like the ASL sign for I love you.
Mm, yeah, I don't know how
And,
much of
and
that, right, but
but I mean, I could go on and on about this, but the point is, like, we had a whole bunch of people that were here either seeking asylum under like a temporary legal status or not legal
well,
status, but none of them were given any due process whatsoever. None of
well,
them were given the
I think
opportunity to
you're
challenge.
not going to win. You're not going to win the other side's argument here. The due process argument is kind of the one clinching thing you have to win the argument. Is there needs to be some due process.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is like, if you want to deport people, then you need to make a case for it, and they need to be able to provide their side of the argument. And as soon as we stop providing due process to people, we're no longer a democracy.
Well, look, now that we've lost half of our listeners that
Yeah,
are
but the other half are
listening,
listening more intently now.
I would say most of them are probably not interested in politics either, but they just don't vehemently disagree with you. To our single single listener left, the question is, and this is not a kind of government standpoint, international discussion, but and I mean it could be an international discussion, but not in that direction. Are people getting shittier? And what that I mean is, and I I've kind of noticed this change since coronavirus. When it's come to people showing up for appointments, people returning phone calls, people just being like reasonable, that treating treating you the way that you would treat other people because you want to be treated that way, if that makes sense. But we've had a number of people that like just don't show up for appointments that they confirm just hours before. Uh, to me, that is extremely rude, and there's no. It's a really dick thing to do to not show up to appointment. Now, I feel like if you got an eyebrow appointment or a nail appointment where they're going to charge you if you don't make it, of course you let them know. But without that charge there in advance, it's really easy to just disregard somebody entirely. James,
Well, yeah, the thing is, and this is going to be a theme for the discussion, is that when consequences don't exist for negative actions, those negative actions will persist.
but it's not. It's not even like it's not somebody like sending you a text message, go fuck yourself, and then just missing the appointment. But it's just somebody it's not even really a negative action. It's almost like
Yeah, it is. It's not respecting somebody else's time or effort.
but it's there is no action. Right? They're actually taking zero action.
Okay, but ignoring somebody in certain contexts is very rude.
It's really so. I actually sold a vehicle last week, and they put down a deposit. And they were actually first off, they're supposed to be at my house at like 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30. They pushed it back to a little bit later, and then just disappeared for like 40 minutes. And I had to be out of the house by 12:30. Um, I went for a jog and came back, and they were messaging me saying, "Hey, we're here." I was like, "Well, I didn't, or we're almost there." I was like, "I didn't think you were coming." So either way, delayed me. Ended up being late to where we were going, and because it was raining out and I was in a hurry, I had handwritten a contract. They put down a $200 deposit, which is not very much money for a deposit, but that was all the money they had on them. So I said, you know what, I'll take it. Get out of here. Let me write up this contract. I wrote the contract twice, something about a deposit and something about delivering the title. And they messaged me today and said, hey, actually, we found a different vehicle. Could you send us the deposit back?
No, that's
And
what the deposit was for.
well, I looked at the contract and there was no stipulation about it being kind of a good faith deposit, and it was $200. So, but to me, that was just like what world do you live on? You put down a deposit and then change your mind and expect the deposit back. I mean, that's a very small example. I have some more we're going to get into in a little bit, but to me, like you and I that grew up when we did as rational people, if I'm like, here, James, here's $5 to save a slice of pizza for me, and then you save the slice of pizza, you don't eat it, even though you were hungry, you wanted to eat the pizza. Other people came and said, have the slice of pizza, and you said no. And now that the pizza is worth less and it's cold, I say, hey, James, can I get my $5 back? And I think I just would expect you to send it back. And then if you send it back, I would go online and leave you a bunch of negative reviews because you were the bad guy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, when it comes to you selling the vehicle, you're operating as a private person. So, like, who cares if there are negative reviews?
But because here's what happens to me, because even though I am a private person in my private life, people just look up my public life and just say shit online. I had this guy that left a whole bunch of bad reviews a couple years ago. Had nothing to do with the real estate business at all.
Yeah, so that's why you don't name a business after yourself.
No shit. But even somebody just searches my name, they'll find the business.
Yeah, there's plenty of businesses that you would have to do quite a bit of work to figure out who the actual owner of the business is. And if someone's willing to go to that level of research, whatever, man.
So look, another thing we talked about a couple weeks ago is I use the Nextdoor app. I'm trying to get involved in the community because I'm starting to, I want to work a little bit more in New Jersey. And I posted about me getting pulled over. I was eating a piece of toast, driving to work. And
we've heard this story like 5 times at this point.
But this turned into this kind of all-out brawl, but between different neighbors about the ethics of eating while driving. And I said to this one guy, I said, I'll bet if we were having this conversation in person, not only will we end up being friends and joking about it, like it would be a fun conversation. But somehow you're dug in playing this keyboard warrior attacking me. Where does that come from? And that's kind of the premise of today's topic is how can people be so rude to each other these days?
Well, again, I said this is going to be a theme of my responses is like a lack of consequences. Is if you're shitty to somebody else in person, you have to deal with that person in real time. And if you're in public, you have to deal with other people's reactions to your inappropriate behavior. Whereas when you're online, there are no consequences. Well, and most of the time, if you're even somewhat savvy, you can operate completely anonymously online.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things you could do anonymously in person, right? Somebody cuts you off, you could key their car, it's things like that. But I don't know of any uptick of those things,
I mean, unless you're driving a Tesla.
You've seen I saw a bunch of Teslas with like Honda Civic on the back of them and a whole bunch of other did you see any of those pictures?
I've heard about this. I haven't. I don't really get out much, so I don't know. But and I'll tell you that I don't think I saw a single Tesla when I was in Spain.
Yeah, that does not surprise me. Did you see it? Did you see different brands of cars that you don't? I mean, I imagine you would. I'm just
lots of them. Peugeot, Opel, Renault. Those are all very popular. The car I had rented was a Kia Stonic.
Oh, you're in a Kia. Okay. The
Yeah,
Stonic is not. Does that have a American version? So a lot of times
I
they name the vehicles. It's the same vehicle, same chassis, same body, but it has a
I
different
don't
name.
think so, because it was kind of like it was somewhere between like a station wagon and a very small SUV and a sedan. Like
And so
it
not a
was
hatchback, just a
I
long
mean, it was
hatchback.
kind of a hatchback, but it was small.
It was a
But it
long
also had
hatchback,
like
but a short station wagon.
yeah, like a short station wagon that was a little bit higher than you would expect a normal station wagon to be, but by no means an SUV. And it was like a 1.4 liter, 100 horsepower engine.
Interesting. So it's a pretty light car.
Yeah, and yeah, it it wasn't bad at low speeds, but like getting it up to highway speed, like I had to redline third gear to get up to like
At,
highway speed at a rate that I was comfortable with.
at least it was stick. When we went to Colorado a couple years ago, and we ended up renting a Prius, and it's obviously a lot of mountainous terrain, a lot of hills. I remember having my foot all the way down on the gas on a hill. Slow, the speed was decreasing, and I'm going like, if this hill keeps going, we're just going to come to a complete halt.
Well, that's the thing about the EU is the majority of cars over there are stick.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody knows how to drive stick over there.
That is
And
changing. Uh,
it is, but like in the United States, it's probably like 90 to 97% of cars, probably like 95 to 97% of cars are automatic in some form here. Whereas in Europe, it's like, I think it's like new cars, 35 to 40% are manual. So that's still a huge difference. And
yeah.
like when I was looking at rental cars, like almost all of them were manual, which not
Oh,
an issue for me.
my experience rental cars are overseas are mostly automatic because they know they're getting a lot of tourists.
Well,
All right, so I kind
yeah,
of thing I
anytime
want
I've rented overseas, it's always been a manual, and like in Tenerife, since like they get so few Americans, there's just not much demand for
to. Well,
automatics.
that would make sense in Tenerife. All right, moving on. My next question is: now that people are more connected than ever, and you can connect with pretty much anyone at any point, any time of the day. Why are relationships so much less, so much easier to go away? Why don't people have as deep relationships? Interactions are just not as in depth. People don't have the connections that they used to.
I have two answers to that.
I mean, I feel like this one's a pretty simple one, but I think it needs to be said for the sake of the topic.
Well, I have two answers to that because I think the second one you're familiar with, but you're not going to expect. So the first is that we may have more connections now than we might have had 30 or 40 years ago, but so many more of those connections are superficial in nature. So they're nowhere near as deep, and that also makes them inherently less valuable. So if those connections are not as valuable to us, then we're not going to put in the effort to preserve them. And the second one, and it's related, is you're aware of the rule of 150, right?
Yeah, whose principle is that?
I should look it up because I don't
You
remember.
explain it. You explain it so we can reference it.
All right. Yeah. So the rule of 150, sociologists have studied kind of society and like throughout history, and also social structures that exist, just like social structures that people build within societies, and they found that there's a pretty hard cap on the number of relationships any one person can manage, and that number is 150. And so when they looked at like
Also known as Dunbar's number.
yeah, and well, like it started when they looked at like ancient villagers back during like not quite hunter gatherer times, but close,
Well,
and they found that like
you have a community, right? You have a community, a small family, and then a couple generations later, it's quadruple number of people, and a few generations later, it's even bigger. At a certain point, it's so many people that you can't have relationships with everybody that's there, and usually it will splinter off.
right, and they found that like they rarely found any villages that were larger than about 150 people, because once that number was exceeded, there would be people that were no longer socially connected to the group, so they would leave and found their own village, and then this pattern would repeat. And so like if you think about the average person on Facebook, how many connections do they have? It's probably over 150. It's not.
I would say
It's just,
probably 10 times that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, mine is 0 times that, but um, but yeah, it makes it so that we're just not equipped to handle the volume of social interaction that we have, and so it also makes it so that whenever you try and put in effort towards managing these more distant or tangential relationships, that takes away energy from your ability to manage your closer relationships because you have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of energy with
And
which
brain
to be
capacity.
social.
Yeah. And bandwidth and brain capacity. I had a great conversation with an old friend who's from the Brunswick area. Dan, him and I, I reach out to everybody on their birthday on Facebook, and he messaged me back yesterday. He said, "Hey, man, I have a question for you," and him and I weren't great friends back in the day, but it was really nice to reconnect and follow up and just kind of find out what he's doing. But it's just so wild that somebody that you once knew, you have so much distance between people. And the thing is, to have that tight relationship like I do with siblings, and obviously you and Rosh and people I see and talk to all the time, you just can't. You only have so much capacity for it. So
For people that I knew in high school, um, I talked to 3, and one didn't even go to my high school.
yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid or being in high school and like adults being like, yeah, I don't even know who this was or that was. I barely remember any of it. And I said the other day, I'm like, I struggle now to kind of. I walked by a high school. I walked by a school, and there were kids outside. I was like, wow, that seems so distant and foreign to me. A couple of the things to add to why people, even though they have more connections, are less connected, is that the interactions that we have with people don't. So, if I'm messaging somebody on a regular basis, or emailing them, or texting them, or DMing them, or sending them memes, that's not the same type of interaction. It's a much lower stakes interaction than when you're in person. When you're in person, you're attuned to that person's body language, their voice tone. Your connection is just based on a lot more than just the definition of the words exchanged by text. And so you develop these deeper connections. And you kind of touched on kind of like replaceability or ease of entering these acquaintanceships.
Well, and it's also related to like the phenomenons that we've witnessed in online dating.
Well, the ability to replace and
Yes.
the ease of entry. So it's really
Yes.
easy to connect with people and replace them if things aren't great. So I don't know. It's a little. It is nice to be able to have more connections, a greater number of connections. But I certainly say that certainly comes at the expense of the quality of those connections. Next up, I have is the turning of phone calls and the keeping of appointments and messaging people back. The reasons for that. And I mean, we've touched on, again, we're going to have a lot of recurring answers on this, but the accountability factor, right? The fact that there are no repercussions for just not showing up.
In most cases, no.
It's real. But I mean, for me, it's like a basic principle of who I am, not to just treat people like shit. I mean, that is the golden rule, right? You do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And we are very far away from that, especially when accountability is nil. Another thing that's in our notes here is we have for hundreds of years upheld a certain etiquette, and it's been almost part of our instructional upbringing and societal norms, and we don't really have this etiquette anymore.
Yeah, but that's also the complaint you're making right now is made by every generation of the previous generation. Like
Well, I mean,
people
I
that are
think we
25
certainly.
or 30 years older than us said that about us. And people that are 25 or 30 years older than them said that about them. And you can trace this back like like seriously this goes back thousands of years of
Well, but I mean,
like
I think it's
you find
happening.
Greek and Roman texts
But
where like people are complaining about like the mendacity or like flakiness or anything else of the today's young generation in year 10 AD.
I know, I believe it, but
Seriously, this exists. I can find these
no,
for you.
I fully believe you, and I've probably seen some of it, but I think change is happening faster nowadays.
That's indisputable.
Well, I mean, I had a job back in the day where you had to be clean shaven and wear a white button up shirt and a tie every day, and now you don't have to be clean shaven, and you can wear basically whatever the fuck you want.
Well, you could look like the New York Yankees. They used to have a policy where every player had to be clean shaven, and just this year they're relaxing it to as long as you're well groomed, you can have a beard or a mustache.
Yeah,
You can't be scruffy and look like a caveman, but
um, I don't know. But I think that things are sliding a little bit, and I think that there is. I don't. So what I'm saying here's my point. I think is that we have almost upheld a certain undefined etiquette. And there are actually books. I have this one book back here about actual like Victorian day etiquette that for whatever reason, when I was a kid, like a young kid, like very young, used to read. It was well defined rules. You know, people used to have to go to finishing school, and they could learn. You know, women went to whatever women's classes there were, so they could learn how to
one of my
be a
favorite things
lady.
to say to somebody whenever they do something that's like stupid or awkward or whatever, I just like say, well, what finishing school did you go to?
I no one even knows what finishing school is.
Yeah, I know, but I love saying that. Um,
But I mean, no, seriously. You know, give me if you're on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, give me a thumbs up or something if you've heard of finishing school, and get thumbs down if you have not heard of finishing school, because I feel like probably no one even knows what that is.
uh,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, real quick, a couple other like just fun things I like to say to mess with people is if somebody's reading and they're stumbling over a word, just say, sound it out.
I do that all the time.
And the other one, I even used this earlier today on my brother, is like if somebody like says something that's either unintelligible or they just point, you just say, use your words.
Uh, no, I do it in a very professional setting. Tell people to sound that out all the time. It's not nice. We got a comment here on TikTok from Vintage Barbie saying, "I'm a finisher baby." That's nice. You know, it's nice to know that some people still do that and hold a value to it. But I actually think the fact that like most people wouldn't even know what finish school is.
Now, I know what finishing school is. I don't know of any that are in operation, and I have not met a single person that I know of that has gone to one.
Yeah. Imagine before you took a trip to Tenerife that you actually took classes on how to behave in a different country.
Well, I actually kind of did.
Well, I mean, I know your personality, and I would not be surprised if you like read about customs.
No, no, no. What I'm saying is, like, when I lived in Bilbao for 6 months,
Yeah.
and like when I took Spanish class for like 12 years, that was like, because the thing is, once you get to a certain level in Spanish class, sure, you're learning the language and the vocabulary and verbs, but in order to keep it interesting and not just be like, okay, here's the conjugation of escuchar. Like it's
Yeah,
you're
you need
mixing in culture and other
culture.
elements. So you're talking about culture in Spanish and you're learning words about that culture in Spanish. So when you get to like I would say even the intermediate level, you're no longer just dealing with like dry vocabulary. You're talking about things that happen in Spanish speaking countries in Spanish. And so before I even got to Spain, I had some familiarity with their culture.
Well, yeah,
And then once I got there, I had a shitload more to learn. And so when I got to Tenerife, I didn't I didn't have any worries about like how I was going to fit in. And on my very last night that I was there, I was staying at a hotel that was owned by a Polish woman who spoke Spanish way better than I do, and spoke English well decently better than most. I would give her credit for
all right.
speaking English
Where are you
decently.
going? So
Anyway,
you met the
like
owner.
I
Okay.
was complaining about some stuff, and or she was complaining about some stuff, and she's like, "Have you been to Spain before?" And I said, "Yeah, I live in like the País Basco." And she's like, "Yeah, that's not Spain." I was like, "I know," but she's like, "You need to get like the culture here is very different than like where you were." Um, so yeah, there's always going to be something to learn, but like I also had, like I consider like my last trip as like I already knew what to do.
All right,
And
to bring it home, yeah, and I think our high school did a very good job of the language programs and teaching us about culture. All right, because we're halfway through the podcast, I want to re-answer the previous podcast Bart trivia question. Hopefully, you remember this answer, James. This is a good one. Gary Gladhand, the politician, was tired after a long day of campaigning. At 10 p.m., he went to bed and he wound his alarm clock. He set it for noon the next day. Since Gary fell asleep almost immediately, how many hours did he sleep before his alarm clock woke him up? Do you know the answer?
I do, because I remember it from last week.
Yeah, that makes one of us. Go ahead. What's the answer?
2 hours.
He slept 2 hours because the alarm clock went off when?
At midnight.
Yes, because the alarm clock that you would wind, you're only going to be able to wind it for 12 hours. There is no tomorrow. It's just every 12 hours. Stay tuned to the end of this episode. I got a good one today, actually. I think this is it's a good math one, but it's an easy math one.
What you just said made me think of Groundhog's Day.
Winding the clock?
No, there is no tomorrow. There is only 12 hours.
There's only 12 hours. It's only 18 hours or whatever. I think it was 6 a.m. was when his alarm went off. I watched that this year a few times at Groundhog Day.
I feel like you have to watch that movie twice in a row every time.
I think there's no other way to do it, right? I just in my office, I just put it on the big TV in the conference room and just let it play all day long. It's one nice thing about having an office again. All right, Gary Gladhand. Let's get back to the topic, and I want to talk about some things that exacerbate the meanness online. Why people are so mean. So we know you mentioned already the anonymity about people can post things and it doesn't get back to their real lives.
I really think that that's the biggest one by far.
Well, but let me ask this: the algorithm promotes more provocative content.
Sure.
And I'm in a bit of a comment war right now on YouTube. Actually, this is one of the ones I told you I wanted to give some examples. This is a new one, but I wanted to share this one. This person is just making kind of mean and rude comments. But
on the SipTalk podcasts or what?
No, not on our podcast. On an apartment that I posted. I'll give you the full story in a second. But I'm answering the comments because it's helping the video trend, right? So
that's stupid.
So here's what I got. I have an agent who is out of town right now, and he asked me to help on his listing. So we got it online. We got it on Street Easy, which is it's owned by Zillow. It's a major rental platform for New York City. And we got a video of it. So I just threw the video on YouTube so I can reference the video moving forward. Right. And I can send the video of the apartment to people so I don't have to waste time showing it if people aren't interested in it. So it's a $3,300 apartment. Comment one from Colby Elizabeth. She wrote $4,700 broker fee, puke face. And I wrote the broker fee is negotiable. If you have an application ready to make an offer, I'm happy to negotiate. There's no set fee. And she said, any broker fee is pukey face. So I said, well, we can do it for no fee, but you'd have to pay more so the owner would pay us. And she goes, you're being deceptive in the ad. And I was like, it's not an ad, Colby Elizabeth. It's just a video of the apartment. There's no mention of the fee. It's just a video of the apartment. And she said, pay for you to do what? Upload it to YouTube and take a video walking around an empty apartment. And I was like, want to know what, Elizabeth? I didn't even take the video. Let me go back.
All right.
So we go back and forth. And her last one talks about how broker fees are horrible and brokers don't do anything. And she's upset that I'm getting paid if I didn't even take the video. So I replied, I said, Elizabeth, it sounds like you have worked with some pretty lousy agents. Also, you have no idea what you're talking about. The apartment is listed by the agent Yuri. I'm sharing on his behalf and helping him while he's out of town. And what the hell are you mad about? Someone showing a video of an apartment. There's no discussion here about fee. It's just on here so we can let people see it. Why are you taking the keyboard warrior position? Are you trying to change the world, save the internet, protect the little guys? It's a damn. Hang on, let me finish. I got one more.
I have. I
want to promote my answer because I'm pissed off at Colby Elizabeth. I said it's a damn video of an apartment. Focus on something that matters. Go look at serial videos and waste your worthless time talking about food dye. Follow some soaps and ask why you can't use their brand on ducks. Follow the local weatherman and light them up whenever they say something wrong about the forecast. Change the world. You can do bigger things. But like,
So you know who lost here?
what's that?
You know who lost here?
What you're saying is that I lost because she engaged me and I'm wasting my time. What I'm telling you is the more we go back and forth, the more the video trends. I don't give a fuck. I just think it's really funny that she has random stranger found a video of an apartment and now she somehow feels like it's her place in the world to make comments about a fee, which isn't even mentioned. I understand
you engaging so much. All you've done is validate her.
But her point is about broker fees, which this is just a video of an apartment.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that by you engaging, you have validated her position.
I disagree with you. If I took a video of my motorcycle in the driveway and just said, "Here's a motorcycle," and then somebody was like, "Gasoline consumption vehicles are ruining the world," and I was like, "It's a video of a motorcycle," and she's
no. What I'm saying is that anytime you engage with people like this, as soon as you respond even once, you have validated them. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you do.
Well, I'm going to defend it because and I could just delete it
because it's something that you did, and you can't accept that.
Well, I could have just deleted it. I could have just deleted her comment, but the more comments, the better. But my question is why does she give a fuck?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, so what my question is that what's making her do this? So my thinking is she's mad that she probably had to pay a broker fee, or that she at some point in the past she couldn't afford an apartment that she wanted because it cost more than she wanted it to.
The fact that you're thinking about this so in depth to this moment proves my point.
Of what?
That she won.
No, we're doing a whole podcast as to why people are compelled to just hold some position on something that is not even in their life.
She won.
Okay. You're missing my point. Okay. You've taken sides now with her that I entertained her argument.
I'm not taking her side position wise. I'm taking her side. I'm not taking her side in any regards. Like she's
you decided to declare her the winner because I entertained her.
No, I'm not saying that I'm saying that she's a loser too. But the fact is, like, when you roll around with pigs, you end up smelling like shit.
Sure. But my question is, why do people feel that there's a lot? I mean, there's every once in a while, like I have a couple of drinks and sit on Instagram and make some comments that I think are silly and funny. But it's also like tongue-in-cheek humor. This woman is like passionate about thinking somehow she's sword-wielding fighting brokers, okay, and a lot of that has to do with her, it's this tribalization, right? This us and them. She's defending her disenfranchised people who can't afford apartments, under the shield of somewhat anonymous post. Her name is actually her YouTube username. I didn't watch any of her videos, but it's just, I feel bad to a degree, and I know you're going to say you shouldn't feel bad. Fuck them, for the celebrities that like get dressed in whatever clothes and they go to an award show, and then the internet just tears them apart the next day. Like, why is it a random person who sat on their fucking sofa on a Sunday evening? Why do they belong in the conversation about someone's wardrobe choice?
Well.
And I understand an absurd amount of attention goes into wardrobe choices for award shows for most people, but it's just silly that somebody who sat on their sofa believes that this is a discussion that they need to be involved in. And it's the same thing that's happening here.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, like, what causes people to take an obsessive interest on one topic or another is, I mean, it is deep enough to warrant a complete, like, doctoral thesis in psychology. So for us to try and diagnose why somebody would choose to post obsessively about one thing or another is far beyond the scope of anything that I can address. What I'm saying is that
We have a comment here from Tayrock XO. It said, "It's the battle all agents face to the main market perception of the work that we do. We have to think deeply about the psychology of the market, the psyche of the market." I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, that's basic sales, is that you need to understand what your customer is thinking before your first interaction.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just silly. Like again, if I just uploaded a video of my motorcycle, and then
Can we move on from this?
somebody started battling me about gas consumption
Yeah, I
and
know.
fossil
Can we
fuels.
move on from this? We've
Oh,
got a lot more to cover.
all right, so bring what's next here.
So, like, I do want to talk about the whole, like, you started off talking about how there's the various algorithms on YouTube or Facebook or wherever else, like, are designed to bring controversial content in front of people because their research clearly shows that drives longer engagement, like more and longer engagement.
Well, that's why when
Because
you say she won, I was like, well, I was the one. I could have just deleted the comment and moved on, but I
right,
recognize the controversy.
yeah, that
Is good
like
for the video.
no, yeah, but it's bad for the world though, and the thing is, the reason why all of this works is very simple. Is anger is probably the most motivating emotion out there.
Yeah, I
And
anger
and if you
discomfort.
can
Yeah,
find ways of making people angry, then you can get them on your side very easily. That's how our modern politics has gotten as bad as we are, and that's why Fox News has the highest ratings of any cable news network. Is if you can make people angry, they will stay engaged.
yeah, very true.
And yeah, you can see that on Facebook all the time. You can see that anywhere on social media. And what I say to anybody is, don't be a part of it.
Yeah, well, but for, those of you who are listening and watching us need to understand that I'm not a big fan of being on your phone all day. I look forward to the day where I don't have to carry any cell phones with me ever, and I can just check in here and there to see if anybody needs me, and then ignore most of them and just contact the important ones, and basically just kind of live off the grid. But
Sasha says people like her will argue on Twitter or Instagram just for the likes or views. And I would agree with Sasha, and I would say that your behavior in this instance is no better.
but hang on. What I'm saying is that James has decided he's already that person who, for the last, well, up for all of history, up until the last about 2 years ago, didn't even have a voicemail that was functional. And James is living the life that I think is, would be ideal, to be mostly disconnected, to be off of social media. However, I, given my role, and recognizing that social media is free promotion, and because of what I do, I have to be on these platforms. I mean, it's not terrible. I'm not like pinned down to it, but I do, to a degree, need to be doing these things for the sake of business. Um, I, I don't think it's great for society. And one thing that gets me about communication online. So I now I'm getting into Reddit, and you and I have talked about Reddit a decent amount. I subscribe to the sub texts. You familiar with that one?
Yeah, I don't really care for that one so much.
It's usually, I mean, it's a lot of bullshit, but it's oftentimes people who have just, they're not understanding what the other person is saying. They've kind of missed the nuance of the conversation, or something was mispunctuated or not punctuated at all,
Yeah,
and it just didn't
it's
land correct.
generally one, but more frequently both parties being very poor at communication.
Exactly, that's exactly my point. And then it just devolved from there.
And I mean, I run into that with my job every single day, where I have to deal with people that are bad at communicating and find a way of clearly stating what needs to happen. And it's really frustrating.
I mean, look, dude, that next door app where I say, hey, police are out this weekend, and then it turned into fucking neighborhood war about me putting the neighborhood at risk because I was eating while driving.
Look, like the fact that still keep on talking about this, like, you feed off of this attention.
Well, first off, no, I don't feed off. It actually detracts from me. It
Yeah, but you're still talking about it.
I'm very much, our whole episode is based on it. This whole episode of SipTalk is based on it. But I think it needs to be a conversation that's happening. Like, because it's only going to get worse if we don't address it. The fact that some random neighbor wants to lambaste me over X, Y, and Z, which wasn't even the point of the post.
So here's something that I was thinking about as we were leading up to this cast. Is like the question is, are people getting shittier? And I don't actually have a strong answer to that, because I'm not entirely sure that the answer to that question is yes.
So let me, on that note, I'm going to go back to the Nextdoor app. When I said to this guy, I said, hey, John B., if we were having this conversation in person, we'd probably be getting along, because I actually think people are pretty much the same. It's people aren't getting that much shittier. It's just that the platforms allow for it.
Well, I also think that it's a salience bias as well, where the times where people treat each other with respect or friendliness or compassion, and this goes back to the algorithm thing, but it's not purely the algorithm, but we are much less likely to remember the benign interactions that we witness every day because they don't stick out.
Mm-hmm.
And so with when you're on social media or whatever, if you're reading for an hour, you're only going to remember the 5 or 6 minutes that you were reading of people being shitty to each other. But the other 54 minutes where you're just like catching up on various things that weren't particularly controversial, those aren't going to stick in your mind. And so I really do think that if you were to go back, 200 years, I mean, we had slaves. So, and like you can look at like racism and all that kind of stuff, and like while we're having a backslide in those areas right now, like over the past 200 years, we've made tremendous progress towards equality and like
I mean,
treating
there
people
still may be
better.
racism,
So,
but like if you were somebody of a minority, if you're a minority, would you rather live in like 1952 or 1813 or 1473 or
or today.
2025?
Right.
Right?
It's
Like
like
I agree with you. I
in a
know what you're
lot of ways
saying.
things
I know
are
what you're saying.
better now, but we can also have the ability to pay attention to so much more. And because of the way our brains are wired, we're going to pay attention to the shitty things. But
And
like, yeah,
they're also flashing on billboards in front of us because the algorithm is drawing more attention to it.
right. But I think that the actual prevalence of like antisocial behavior is probably about as low as it's ever been.
Well, people used to go to the public square, the town square, and stone the bad guy. They used to watch people be hanged almost as a pastime. They used to go to the not the Parthenon, what's the Roman
Colosseum.
Colosseum, and watch people. Like those are pretty lousy things.
Could you imagine watching somebody being hanged today?
Dude,
That'd be traumatizing.
it would be traumatizing. I mean, I don't even like watching. You ever see like people die on the internet?
I
Twitter.
try to avoid those videos.
I do too. I literally I don't even like watch the fails, like where like some guy like tries to do a skateboard trick and it like hit nuts. I don't even like watching those.
Any video of somebody being injured or dying, like
I try to skip
I
right
will
past
only watch if I clicked on mistake.
me as well. I really, but I don't know. Basically, since Elon Musk bought Twitter, it's gotten worse, and
I'm sure it has.
sometimes it's tough. It's tough to avoid them. Like you don't want to see it, but you
Well,
do.
right. I said like every once in a while, I'll click on a mistake. I'm like, oh damn it, I didn't mean to watch that. I
When
don't
I
want
was
that in my
when
life.
I was like 14 years old, there used to be a website called Faces of Death, and I didn't go to that website, but I stumbled across a video from maybe I don't know if it was a website or not. It was a thing. I stumbled across a video of like somebody being beheaded, and it instantly made me nauseous, and I didn't feel right for a few days after that. And every time I think back to that, I'm like, damn, that was sick. That was disgusting. But guess what? People and their kids used to go to these events and watch this shit happen in real time. And
Yeah,
it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually like you eat popcorn and fucking watch it. I mean, not exactly, but a version of that.
right. So the answer of are people getting shittier? My answer would be no, but there are certain aspects in which we're worse, and there are a lot of aspects in which we're a lot better.
Well, I mean, so okay, so I'll I'll buy into the fact that uh, as a whole, we're better now to each other, and we have more institutionalized. Uh,
I do think we've made some significant strides backwards in the last 15 or 20 years, though.
and and I think a lot of it has to do with the ease of being shitty and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
anonymity. And I mean, ghosting wasn't a thing until 20 years ago.
No, it
Not
was.
even.
It just didn't have a name.
Well, but it was harder to do.
Not really.
Well, if you
I would argue it was actually easier to do.
well, there's two sides to this. But listen, if you met somebody 20 or 25 years ago, it probably wasn't because you met on an app. Okay, you
No.
like you had some connective tissue between you and them. So if you just ignored them all of a sudden, it would get back to you and somehow whatever. Now you meet somebody on an app, nobody knows the next person. You meet them once and just never answer them again.
Yeah,
Never
I
getting back.
get your argument, but I'm still saying that, like, if you wanted to go somebody 20 years ago, it wasn't all that difficult.
Well, I mean, now I feel like it would be impossible to like cheat on somebody or commit a crime or like do anything anonymously because there's cameras and connection and social media. That's impossible now. What you're saying is 25 years ago, there weren't security cameras, cell phones, social media profiles, things like that. I'm following you there.
Yeah, it's like if all they have is like your home address, phone number, like you didn't
Your
have a
home
cell
address.
phone, who's calling?
They had your fucking home address. Oh
Yeah,
man.
like your landline.
I'm about to get back my childhood landline. By the way, it's inbound my way. I'm kind of excited for that.
Are you actually going to hook it up to an actual telephone line?
No, but I do have the rotary phones in my basement.
Yeah, are you going to hook it up to like some kind of like VoIP protocol so that you can actually make phone
Well,
calls from it?
it's going to go to my watch. You know how much my cell phone bill is every month? By the way, $295.
That's
And
absurd.
that's with paperless billing and auto pay and all that shit turned on. I went to the AT&T store. I was there for over an hour, and the people just kept disappearing into the back room. And they're like, "Yo, I'll be right with you." And they just kept disappearing. And then it almost got like comical. Like I felt like maybe I was on candid camera. Like somebody would be walking towards the door, and I'd stop them and be like, "Hey, this guy went in, and he said he'd be right back, but it's been like 11 minutes, and I've been here for 34 minutes. Could you just like see if?" And then they'd come back out, and then I'd be like, "Oh, I thought you were going to send." He's coming right out, and then like it was this weird like circus fucking series of events, and I ended up calling AT&T and got my bill reduced by over $100, which is nice, but still fucking almost $200 a month. It's insane. Uh, Thanks for your input, James. I like when you react to zero. Like, I make a statement and you just stare at your computer screen.
I don't know, like that irks people, but
Two
like
hundred dollars is a lot of money for a fucking cell phone bill.
yeah, but like people are like, "Don't you have anything to say?" And I said, "No." And they're like, "Well, why didn't you say anything?" I was like, "Because I don't have anything to say. If you say something and I don't have a response, then I'm just not going to respond."
I know. Too
They're like,
bad.
"Yeah, but you could say like, oh, I don't know what to say to that." I'm like, "I'm not going to."
Too
Like,
bad. I need. Sometimes I'm going to have to remind you that we are putting on a show, right? You're on stage right
yeah,
now.
I know,
You're on
but
stage. If sometimes you just wave your arms around for no reason and make some noises, like in response, that's all right.
no, no, no,
But
no.
if you say nothing, it's like, oh man, the guy forgot his lines. I feel really bad. That's
No,
my
no, no.
fault.
I'm doing it to emphasize a point.
All right, I'm going to hit the bar trivia question. We could talk about. We could talk if you want about ghosting a little bit more, or we hit our little conclusion slides here. But I want.
I do. Yeah, I do want to touch on that just a little bit. But
All right,
yeah,
so
go
let me
hit
hit the
the
bar
bar
trivia
trivia.
question.
Yeah.
This is a good one. All right. I look forward to passing out this answer next week. Which would be worth more, a pound of $10 pure gold coins or a half pound of $20 pure gold coins? Or would they be worth the same amount? Explain. All right. So, again, the question which is more, a full pound of $10 pure gold coins or a half pound of $20 pure gold coins? Or would they be worth the same? and you must.
I mean, I've got the pedantic answer here.
And it's probably the right one. And you need to explain your answer. So, where did you want to go? What do you want to say?
Well, I'm actually. I had a conversation with one of my friends in Charleston who has since left Charleston, and
The conversation went that poorly?
yeah,
Was the
I would
conversation
like
over Twitter?
no, this was in
Reddit?
person.
Oh, it's in person.
Many of these similar kinds of conversations with him because I think that he has a number of really bad attitudes when it comes to dating, and
Mm.
he would complain about getting ghosted after a date or two,
So
and be
you
like,
sent him to live in Utah?
"No, he's in Florida now."
It's also fucked.
It, it,
Go ahead.
and I would say, look, like ghosting's not as bad as you think it is. Like the you nobody owes you anything, and if they're ghosting you, like they don't owe you an answer. Like sure, it would be nice if you got one for your own mental health or whatever, but they don't owe you anything. And so if someone ghosts you, then your job is just to move on. And
But
real
that's the thing
quick,
about ghosting is it makes it really tough to move on because you don't know that you're being ghosted right away. Like you have to come to terms with it yourself. I
I
don't
don't think
think I've
it's
been
all that
ghosted, by the
difficult.
way. I mean, somebody who may have ghosted me could maybe chime in on that, but
Well, I think about
I don't know that
this
I have been.
about 4 years
Oh,
ago.
actually, hold on. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm thinking my mind's spinning. I was told recently by somebody uh, who worked for my company, and I like this person. She's a nice person. Um, she stopped working for my company, and then we ended up reconnecting 3 or 4 years later, and then we actually rehired her. And she said, I'm really sorry. I blocked your number. I know you must have been really frustrated, and I went back through I didn't know that she blocked my number. Then I went back through like our text message communication, and I hadn't reached out to her at all. And I chuckled to myself, being like, "Oh, so you ghosted me, but I didn't know." Like, a little funny.
Yeah, I think like I was in a brief relationship about 4 years ago. Dated a girl for 3 or 4 months, and I was starting to feel like it wasn't going to work for me. And then she left town for a week to visit family in another city, and like I sent her a text when she got back to see if she wanted to hang out, and then she had like a friend that was visiting her, and then like I just never heard from her again. And I was like, you know what? It's probably for the best. And like the fact that she ghosted me, I was like, you know what? This is probably easier than any other of the other options that existed.
But did you continue to try to follow up with her?
No,
Because you're a man of high self-esteem. That's why.
I was just like,
Most
you know
people
what?
probably would have been like, "Hey, when are we hanging out?"
I, I have a general rule. I don't always follow this, but I usually do, which is the maximum number of text messages I will send to somebody unresponded is
3?
two.
Oh,
Two.
excuse me.
One, so that like, all right, here's the question or whatever. And then if they don't respond, I'll say like, oh, maybe they saw it but then forgot. So I'll send one more. And that's it.
Insightful of you. Insightful
I
of
mean,
you.
if I'm in the middle of a conversation, like I might send like a couple like
It's so weird these
consecutively, just
days.
saying
Yeah.
like, hey, like here's point 1, 2, 3, 4. But like if I'm sending something and somebody doesn't respond, then they will get one more text message from me, and that's it.
Yeah, but it's weird because, and again, we have seconds left in this cast, uh, but it's so easy to people are almost throwaway. The new relationships are almost throwaway these days, right? It's so easy to start a new relationship. Everybody wants to upgrade the relationship. Everybody wants it doesn't matter because there's always a better opportunity, and it's so easy to get into the next opportunity. I mean,
I
it's not
don't
always.
necessarily see that as a bad thing because the fact that you like the whole idea of like relationships can be throwaway is it makes the relationships that actually last have that much more value.
Yeah, but also we got lower birth rates, lower marriage rates, higher divorce rates. Like
Yeah, and you know what the lower birth rates, the lower marriage rates, The higher divorce rates is actually not really true. The lower marriage rates and the lower birth rates are much more of an economic phenomenon than they are a social phenomenon. And sure, these two things are tied together because economics and social issues like interact.
All
But
right.
no, like
You're out of time.
no, it's like our economy is not conducive to any
All
of these
right. On that
issues.
note, this is the
So
end of the podcast. I can't hear him. James, stay on for a minute.
yeah,
We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining. Don't forget to visit SipTalkPodcast.com. Adios, everybody. See you next time. Sip Talk Podcast. See ya. All right. What are your thoughts? You think people are getting worse? You think they've always been bad? You think maybe they're getting better? Let me know in the comments.